American Culture in the 1700s by Camden Scull. Here were some of the types of people that came into New England to seek land and new opportunity. The first group was the Germans. They were often referred to as the Pennsylvania Dutch. The majority of these people were farmers and laborers. Economically, they were the middle class. This meant that they were not the poorest, they could afford the trip, but they were not better off somewhere else, they wanted to stay. They told other Germans how great it was here by writing letters that prompted more Germans to come to the colonies. Majority of Germans worshipped in Lutheran or German Reformed churches. The next group of people were the Scots-Irish. Most Scots-Irish were militant Presbyterians who resided with relatives from Old Country. This means that they spent time and lived near people who they had already previously known whenever they could. The Germans had also been doing this too because it was better to be familiar with the people around you. The Scots-Irish outnumbered the German immigrants and did the similar thing to the Germans and wrote letters telling other Scots-Irish how great it was here, which prompted so many more of them to come and caused them to outnumber the Germans. The next group of people were the Africans. People of African ancestry were almost all slaves. By 1700, there were over 30,000 Africans in the middle colonies. This made up 7% of the total population. Few Africans came directly from Africa, and most came after a stopover in the West Indies. Slavery became the biggest part of the southern colonies and one of the defining characteristics of them. Slavery shaped the region's economy, society, and politics, and by 1770 there were over 400,000 Africans in the colonies, which made up 40% of the population. Then African American culture started to form when the culture of the colonies started to change and the people were changing with it. The origins began from 18th century slaves who valued family and relationships with others. They did everything they could to keep African culture alive while still conforming to the changes in society. Some of the things they did were they named their children African names to keep those alive. They also grew crops that they were familiar with from Africa, and they built structures such as their houses and huts that were similar structures to the ones they had previously built in Africa. Now here's a map of a lot of the different types of people that came to the colonies and where they settled. It is a good visual to see how many people and where they took up from each different country and just to get an idea of where they were and how big they were. Now here's where American culture begins. Those were all of the types of different cultures that were brought into it, and now they all started to conform into one American culture. Some of the changes in New England that happened to create the new American culture were that the economic roots began in agriculture. Another thing was that religion became less important. They started to focus less on religious beliefs and focus more on the current affairs in the new world that they have. Another thing was that most people were able to consume the things that they needed. They could buy colonial goods and newspapers, which made news be able to travel more faster because everyone was able to purchase it. Because ordinary people were able to purchase the things that they wanted and the things that they needed. So this gave everyone a wider range of choices, and the goods seemed unlimited. More changes that happened in New England were that people were able to choose from almost any religion. Most religions were some denomination of Christianity, but it was still more freedom than they had ever had. People also started to study the world around them, which helped with success because they were always looking for ways to improve their Enlightenment ideas. They also started to create their own laws because the British policies that they lived under did not clearly mention all legal issues, so they took advantage of this opportunity and started to make their own rules. In conclusion, American culture did exist by 1760. things were changing and were starting to be done differently, and meaning all of the cultures that had come to the country were starting to evolve and create one culture of American. Some of the things that created American culture were that people of different ethnicities and backgrounds were coming to the colonies, meaning Americans were defined as all different types of people. They also did not let European countries control them because they wanted to do their own thing and create their own new country and colonies. They also, even though they still slightly lived under British control, they were still trying to do their own things, which created a whole new culture. So they were living under two different identities, the American and the British, but that didn't have too much of an effect on them because they were still trying to do their own thing, and which means that even though there were still some connections to the British, the birth of American culture had already begun by 1760.